Next up, we're going to hear about another collaboration between a channel, Channel 4, and a digital agency. This is Mint Digital, to make data visualization sexy.
We're going to do a bit of a two-hander. And first of all, I'm going to introduce Andy Bell from Mint Digital, who will tell you a bit about what he does and what he did on this project.
Hi, my name's Andy Bell from Mint Digital. I'm a creative director there, so I guess my job is kind of developing ideas and finding partners to kind of bring these ideas to fruition with. So this is kind of Sexperience is a project we've been working on with Channel 4 now for 4 years, and this is something that we it's kind of year 3. So we've done like various things in year 1 and 2 that are kind of progressively optimizing one kind of core idea, and then for year 3 we thought let's create some pieces of what we called magnet content, which were going to be like things that were kind of going to bring new audiences to a kind of site that we were already excited about. So.
And I'm the cross-platform commissioner at Channel 4 for factual stuff, so I do things like embarrassing bodies and sex education show, big fish fight, and that kind of thing. So all factual, but covering quite a range of factual from the most sort of populist end of the scale to the more serious end. If we were going to have a third person up here, which would work quite well, then it would be someone representing the TV show. In fact, I can see in the front of the audience is someone that worked on the first series of the TV show. And what they could tell us about a bit is how the online was integrated into the TV show, but we'll try and capture some of that for you anyway. So to give you a sense of where this project came from, it was something that was integrated into a series called the Sex Education Show, made by Remarkable TV. What it was really was taking an asset from the TV production, which was an Ipsos Mori poll, which cost over 20 grand to do because it was demographically representative and had 7,000 respondees. And rather than it ending up on the cutting room floor and being represented in the show just in a few punctuating bits of statistics, we decided to make something fun with it. And this is the outcome. What we were trying to do was to document a snapshot of people's, UK citizens' sexual behaviour and experience, and document that through data. Now, the emphasis on data came really from a strategic imperative at the channel last year, where, reflecting the way the world is going, there was a lot of thinking about not just how we can gather data and use it effectively, but also how we can entertain with it. And that's where this project started from. Before we dive into a demo, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of the origins from both perspectives. So, as I say, from us, it was largely both a sort of response to the strategic priorities and also to the fact that this expensive bit of information was otherwise going to get chucked in the bin, effectively. Andy comes from a slightly different perspective.
So I think, from our point of view, on a previous project, we'd seen how, if you want to get PR, like doing a survey just kind of seems to be like one of the kind of stock-in-trade ways of getting something in the Metro or the Sun or whatever. So we were kind of well aware that there felt like there was kind of PR potential to a survey. The thing that was kind of nagging at us was like normally a survey kind of accumulates all the data together into a few headlines, and we kind of thought it was interesting that in fact there's a kind of interactivity gives you the kind of a potential that you don't often get in a newspaper, which is to kind of drill down in multiple different dimensions. And one of the focus points for the kind of editorial of the site has always been kind of everything needs to be about this question, am I normal, which we find is kind of right at the core of what teens are wondering when they kind of want to find out about sex. And we found that there's the kind of being able to kind of create this structure that we'll demo in a second that allows you to drill down into kind of not just here's what things look like at a mass level, but also here's what sex looks like for each individual, kind of seem to be right within the kind of core of the editorial vision of the site.
One last sort of piece of contextualization, really, but at the time we were making this, it already felt that data visualization had established all its own cliches and had become quite dull. So creatively, what we were really trying to achieve was just to liven up data visualization again and make it a bit more fun. Before I embark on trying to demonstrate this in a really difficult way, are we able to get that on that screen or not? Do you know?
I think it's easier if you watch maybe.
Not particularly. Okay, I'm going to try and demonstrate this in a slightly sort of awkward, round the corner sort of way. And it would really help to have a mouse or a cursor to do it with. Do we know where it is?
Oh, it's over there. So I think if you go that way.
Ah, yes, there we go. Okay. Okay. So for our next trick, we're going to try and demo this off of the live internet. Anyone that's downloading vast quantities of porn or anything else you might be doing out there, please desist for the next 5 minutes, because we're all sharing the same network. So you can see how the data has been displayed. What it's really trying to do, as Andy was pointing to there, was to display the mass and the individual at the same time. So there's 1,000 separate respondents there. They're boiled down from the original 7,000 to stay demographically representative. And so you can see the 1,000, but at the same time, with any given one of them, you can see their individual details. I actually can't see the individual details from here, but hopefully you can. So you can see their age, their gender, and so forth. Right. Yeah. I'm trying to. Do you know that? Is it control click or something?
Why can't you right click?
Because it's got the full data on it.
I don't know.
Try control click. Sorry, I'm just. Yes, good. Okay, I haven't demoed it on a Mac before. So you can see that you can actually drill down quite a long way into the information about people. So you've got all the kind of demographics and data that you'd expect about age and geographical location and so forth. But you've also got a lot of sort of sociological stuff, such as what cars people have, what phones they have, what supermarkets they shop in, things that are sort of indicative of educative backgrounds and so forth. With any given one, with any given person, you can also follow them from screen to screen, so that if we move on to the next question, which I hope is what that says, we should be able to see our guy. I just sort of over towards the left there with the yellow star. So we can follow that character throughout the journey through this visualization. You then have, I'll give you a sort of typical way that people tend to sort of play with it, but the first thing they tend to do is have a look at the filters and maybe sort of look at something like, what music people like. So we just have a look at hip-hop fans in relation to how many sexual partners they've had. So, probably up the promiscuous end of the scale. And what's useful about the ability to slice the data in so many ways is that it naturally provides its own entertainment and a playful approach. So if you're interested in just how popular nipple clamps are in East Anglia, you can find out very quickly. I'll just give you an indication here as well. So we're not always talking about sort of bar charts. There's all different ways of displaying the data, dependent on what kind of information is underlying it. So people come into the thing, they tend to play around with it. I think the next thing people very often tend to do is think about how they'd answer the questions. And what the overall user experience is doing, in effect, is that it's getting people to engage with the information and get under the skin of it through a playful approach. So you start off messing about and using amusing combinations of filters, and you end up starting to get a sense of what is normal in terms of sexual behaviour, and also what you put yourself at risk of, in the way that you do things. So what's really enjoyable about the thing is that those two things of having fun and getting an insight are completely compatible and simultaneous. And you'll notice the aesthetic is very much a sort of 8-bit computer game aesthetic. It derived from the fact that we started off with the problem of having to display 1,000 characters on screen at the same time. And a lot of them are individually animated, which I think really adds to the experience. And then we made a virtue of the fact that they only had a certain, very limited number of pixels each, and took that as the overall aesthetic, just to really underline the fact that the intention was to create a playful and fun experience. I think you can play with it at your heart's content simply by Googling the Sexperience 1000. I think we'll shift over and just to look a bit about how the project developed and how the interaction between the indie and the broadcaster, the indies and the broadcaster worked in practice. Do you want to shift over to the PowerPoint?
So in terms of how the TV and the digital fitted together, kind of there are really just kind of two main points of kind of interaction between us as a digital partner and the TV partner. Right at the start of the project, we were made aware that there was a plan to do this big survey. We spent quite a lot of time working on like what the questions would be. I think we were kind of both pulling in the same direction, because the kind of questions that were going to be interesting for TV were pretty much exactly the same things that were going to be interesting for the web. And then once we'd got those nailed down, it really, there was kind of quite a divergent path, because I think this kind of data visualization programming type of job really kind of going off, we were kind of going off in our separate directions. In terms of development, should we move on to development? Yeah. I think I've just got some slides here that show how we kind of worked on it. Here's the initial idea we pitched, which I just found this morning, and in fact it's pretty similar to where we got to in the end, but it was a very circuitous path from here to what we finally delivered. So there's we did an awful lot of sketching up of ideas and just kind of trying to work through what this kind of visualization meant. And one thing that kind of really surprised me as we went through it was we found there wasn't anything that had kind of taken this similar approach to what we thought was possible of showing a data visualization that was simultaneously showed the mass and the individual at the same time. So we kind of worked through a lot of sketches with Adam, and there was us and a kind of a digital production partner who was actually kind of making the idea. We were designing it. So we moved from the sketchpad to then onto wireframes, and even these wireframes are kind of a long way from what the final thing was. I think the two kind of biggest challenges through the development process were were both kind of pure kind of creative challenges, I guess. One was how can you have like 1,000 pieces of data on a screen and still have some kind of usable experience. We spent quite a lot of time trying to do it with 2,000, and that was just overwhelming. And then as well as that kind of interaction design, visual design challenge, the second problem was a kind of programmatic challenge of how can you have like 1,000 pieces of data all moving around independently without kind of your computer grinding to a halt. So that's what we spent the majority of our time working on in one way or another.
Okay. I think it's important that we should talk about the integration with the TV, because I think that's really critical to the success of this kind of thing. I always think of that advert that they used to have. I think it was either for the British Museum or the V&A, which said something like, a great cafe with not a bad museum attached. And it's quite easy to fall into that trap when you're doing multi-platform around TV. So, you don't want to create something with not a bad channel attached and not really be using that properly. So the main way of getting people involved in this was a sort of a push to the web off the TV at moments in the program where it contextually felt right and was fluent. It's much easier to do it in this kind of factual features area where the programs are quite fractured and magazine-like anyway, than in a full-on traditional documentary which has got a sort of tight narrative arc and a real kind of an emotional journey that builds and builds. When you've got this more fractured, factual kind of programming, it's a lot easier to do really effective integration. And then in an ideal world, it doesn't. You'll also feed back from the online back into the program. So the program was punctuated with bits of statistics that had been generated from this, slicing the data in interesting ways. So that's a bit on TV integration. The other thing I think I'd like to capture before we wrap up is that it's actually given rise to 3 other developments in which have got a sort of conceptual connection, and I think it's quite interesting to talk about those because once we'd seen this in action, it gave us a real appetite to do more with it. What I should also say is that it had a massive impact both internally and externally, but the internal is really interesting because when the TV commissioners and the sort of the brass at Channel 4 got to see this, it really tickled their fancy, and you could really see they enjoyed this notion that something as far away from TV as data could become entertaining in a proper Channel 4 way. So that had a big impact and gave a lot of TV-only commissioners a real appetite to do this kind of work. Externally, it did very big numbers. I mean, it sits on a site that's had 7 million visits and 40 million page views and 120,000 bits of user-generated content submitted to it, and has a very long average session length of 9 minutes, which is pretty big for those sort of numbers. So, it had quite some impact. But then, perhaps most importantly, is these other projects that have come off the back of it. So I'll let Andy talk a little bit about those.
So there's kind of 3 ideas that we're kind of exploring that are kind of somehow conceptually related to this, as Adam mentioned. So I'll just flick through these slides. That's a bit of the PR it generated. The first one was it's kind of what made the Sexperience 1000 kind of doable was that the data was it's very kind of clean and very kind of scientifically, or sort of in terms of data, it's kind of valid, and we kind of really interested in thinking like one of the kind of points of enjoyment of a piece of a survey is being asked to do it yourself. We kind of thought if we could turn that into the kind of being the crux of the entertainment experience and creating a survey a bit like the Sexperience 1000, but where you're asked to fill in the questions, and you kind of get some sense of where you are in the midst of the kind of British population. You can kind of zoom in and create that kind of experience. And kind of thinking if you could be doing this kind of simultaneously on TV and on a tablet, then that would be a really exciting thing. Haven't quite kind of. Oh, sorry, this has gone too far. So that's one thing that we've been exploring a little bit.
I mean, it's okay to. It's sort of. Some of it's not kind of public domain, but it's okay to give a bit of context for this one. So this one's actually was also inspired by the census that was going on at the time, because we were struck by how absolutely tedious the questions and therefore the answers were going to be. So we thought we'd try and do a census where you could actually find out stuff that were people interested in knowing. So that's what underlies this one.
And then the other one we're kind of still exploring, it's kind of... I guess one of the things that's kind of noticeable, or one of the problems with this, is like if you go through it, you can find some data points that are absolutely ridiculous and highly improbable, i.e. people who are virgins at the age of 49 who've had like 100 sexual partners and had every sexually transmitted disease going. So we kind of thought, we kind of thought, not only, well, it'd be a bit more interesting if the data was like 100% true, but then there's kind of a whole bunch of research in behavioral economics where you're kind of getting that point of cleavage between what people say they think and what people show that they think in terms of what they do. And for me, this is a really interesting area. So it's kind of things where you can show people's behavior to be different from what they think they'd do. So we're kind of trying to construct a TV experience where you're kind of being asked to answer questions, but I guess the questions that you're answering are you're being tested on something different to what you kind of think you're being tested on, so as to allow us to kind of build up a data set that kind of gets at those kind of interesting behavioral economics type experiments.
Yeah, so that's very much in the area of behavioral economics and consumer psychology, I guess. And then the third project that we're working on, which again has sprung off of this, is one about contemporary ethics and morality. So we had a real feeling, here we were working with a closed data set. There are all sorts of directions you can go with it, opening it up, not the least interesting. And we'll see over the next year or two what actually emerges out the other end. We've got just a couple of minutes, so if anyone wanted to ask a quick question, we'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, you can catch us at lunchtime. Is there anyone that wants to ask anything about any of that? No? Oh, yeah, sorry, one at the back, yeah. Okay, so the data, first of all, the data was gathered by Ipsos Mori, so it was a very reputable company doing it. And then all of this sits in a very tight compliance framework. So all the data representative is of over 18s, and on top of that, none of them are identifiable, even if you piece everything together. So it's pretty secure from that point of view. Every page on the site has a parental warning, and on top of which, the whole thing is effectively pre-watershed. So there's nothing on the Sexperience site that is inappropriate for pre-watershed audiences, and we've kept it that way deliberately, even though the show has been on both sides of the border, the sex education show. It's been both started off pre-watershed, has gone post-watershed, has come pre-watershed again, but we've kept the site pre-watershed all the way through because we want the people that really need this sex education advice, the teens and right down to young teens, to be able to actually use it. So on top of that, when we first did the site, we also changed the whole terms of channel4.com to enable 13-year-olds to not just to look at the stuff, but also to ask questions of it. And that was contrary to the original terms of channel4.com. They were changed for this in order to keep the compliance framework completely consistent, that this is an educative project and it needs to be accessible by all the age groups that would need access to it. Okay, well, listen, thanks very much. We've run out of time, but we'll be around at lunchtime if you want anything further. Thanks.